Our last panel is the artist, the author, and the brand. Digital agencies working with artists and authors are creating experiences that lever superfans. This panel is going to look at turning fans into customers and how to build attendance and readership. Shauna de Cartier is our moderator. 15 years ago, Shauna founded Six Shooter Records. She has maintained a steadfast commitment to fostering artistic excellence and to developing a distinct community of mostly Canadian-based artists with international careers. Six Shooter is a record label, a publisher, artist management company. It represents, among many, the Good Lovelies, the Strumbellas, Amila Curran, Joe Nolan, Harlan Pepper, Whitehorse, Ariana Gillis, and other artists. Shauna launched the annual Edmonton Music Festival Interstellar Rodeo, which is attended by more than 10,000 fans and presenting artists such as Blue Rodeo, Randy Newman, Serena Ryder, Steve Earle. The festival quickly gained an international reputation as a taste maker and a trend setter. Okay, Shauna, I'm going to turn it over to you, turning fans into customers. Kavi, are you hooked up? I guess I'm here, right? Oh, wait, I forgot my notes. All right, am I on? Sorry for the delay, we were just getting all hooked up. I'm Shauna de Cartier. Thanks very much for being here, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank the OMDC for continually working towards creating content like this, executive level, cutting edge programming. It's really appreciated from us in the community, so thanks very much. I'm really excited to share with you some of the stories from these really great panelists that we have today, all trailblazers in the digital space. And we decided ahead of time that they're going to introduce ourselves, so we're going to start with you, Candice.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? No,
Hello?
I didn't think so. Let's see.
Oh, thanks.
Can you hear me now? Any help here? Now? Yeah? Okay. Hi, guys. I'm Candice. I'm the general manager of Wattpad. And I've been at Wattpad since just over 2 years. It was a very small company about 2 years ago, and we are now about 100 people. And we're very proud to be from Toronto and Canadian, and we are changing the way people read and share stories. And I'll tell you more about us shortly.
Great.
Hi, is this on? Hello? Yep. Hey, I'm Kavi Halemane. I'm based out of Los Angeles. For the last 15 years or so, I've been working mainly in the music industry, also the entertainment industry, everything from record labels to management companies to media companies. I am well-versed in the digital space. I've been looking after the digital business of A-list artists and entertainers, including, the comedian Martin Lawrence, the bands Linkin Park, Stone Temple Pilots, Godsmack, Slash, the guitar player, Tony Braxton, Kelly Rowland, countless others. So I've been working in this business a while, and happy to share my insight with you all.
Great.
Hi, Rona Mercado from the Cashmere agency. I'm the Vice President of Marketing. We are based in Los Angeles, and we're a lifestyle marketing agency which specializes in targeting 13 to 34-year-olds, millennials, and we really believe in the power of diversity.
I'm Anna Todd, and I am an author now, but I wasn't a year and a half ago, and until I found Wattpad. And now I have a publishing deal with Simon & Schuster, and 27 translations, so.
Awesome. Okay, welcome everybody.
I thought that the best way to get started with this panel, because it's such a diverse group of people, is to drill down and talk about a case study of a project or that each of you has worked on or is currently working on. And I'd like to start with you, Kavi, if we could. Maybe you could at least start with Linkin Park and talk about that, and maybe you might want to go into a few other examples. But.
Sure. Well, the band Linkin Park is probably one of the most digitally savvy and digitally forward bands in the world, not to mention one of the most popular. I think one of the keys to their success in the digital space has been being out ahead of the game, being out first on platforms that are emerging, experimenting with new platforms and startups and doing deals, a lot of which I've had to do with over the years. In order to basically be innovators in a space that's already within itself a very influential space in digital, and that's music. They are the biggest band on Facebook with 67 million fans. They were the first band to 1 billion views on YouTube. So I think more so than anything, the key to their success online has been consistency with content, consistency with outreach, and optimizing their use of the platforms that they're on with a strategy that is tailored for those platforms and not just another platform to use. I see a lot of young artists, coming up in the game that are just pretty much using every app for the sake of using that app, and they're not really developing a real strategy around what they're doing. And that's, I think, the biggest mistake, where you can end up wasting a lot of time utilizing an app and not really getting the most out of the audience on that app.
Can you, was it Linkin Park that was one of the first movers on Line?
Yes.
It's an app called Line.
Yes.
Not online, but an app called
Line is an app in the messaging app space. It's insanely popular in Japan, Asia.
What is Line?
Line, it's a messaging app. It's essentially built to send direct messages, be able to make phone calls, be able to chat, all within the scope of an app and not using SMS, not using an actual phone. It's a smartphone application way of communicating with your friends and now fans online. So Linkin Park was the first band to have an account online, and within 4 months, crossed 4 million followers on that platform, which is more than they have on Twitter, which took 6 years to get to 4 million. So it's about the same. And one of the great things about Line and the messaging app space in general is the ability to actually directly message your audience, whereas with platforms like Twitter and Facebook, it's all pendant upon a feed, some of which, when it comes to Facebook, if you don't pay Facebook, they're not even going to see the post that you make to that feed, right? And an app like Twitter, if you're not there for the 2 minutes that it's on your feed, you're not going to see it. The opposite case is with an app like Line, where you can literally send a direct message into the inbox of that Line user's account and actually have a conversation if you wished. You could also broadcast a chat to your entire fan base, and they'll know when it's happening. So that's very, very key in the growth of social media right now, is the messaging space, and I can get into more of that later.
All right, I want to get more into that later. Let's move on to you, Rona. I guess maybe the example here that everybody is going to be familiar with is Snoop Dogg, and maybe you can talk about how you have worked with him and kept him relevant over a 20-year.
Yeah, he's been in the business for over 22 years, so it's definitely an interesting one to share with everyone. So Snoop Dogg has been a client of ours at the Cashmere agency for about 10 years. And one of the challenges is, how do you keep an artist who has been in the game and in the industry for 22 years relevant to a generation of people who may not have even been born when his first album was out? So we utilize a bunch of different tools. Line is one of the apps that Kavi just mentioned, which is what we use. We use a combination of different tools, anywhere from Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and you know, he is, if you follow him on any of his platforms, he truly is engaging with his fans on those social networking platforms. So working with him and just showing how to stay relevant with his fans and, you know, create new fans is something that, you know, we've been tasked with for the past couple years. And in addition to that, you know, just making sure that we're adopting new technologies, which is why it's so interesting to be here to meet with all these new platforms that we can potentially partner with. But keeping him relevant for the past 10 years has been, quite a challenge, but also very fun and very interesting when you have an artist that is open to adopting new technologies.
Can you talk a little bit about Snoopify?
Sure, so Snoopify, it's a cool little case study. To Kavi's point, he kind of led the path here of why we're going to talk about Snoopify, about messaging or photo apps. So the Line app also has a photo stickering feature, and we did notice in the year 2013, there was this whole emergence of these photo bombing apps or these photo apps. So we created a proprietary app called Snoopify, where you basically can take your photo and just apply these different stickers. So you could take a picture with Snoop because there's Snoop stickers in there. So we received over 13 million downloads on that app and counting to date. Every time that we create specific sticker packs, so we did a collaboration with an online app called Eat24, where you can basically place your order online for food and they deliver it. We did a special munchie pack, and that munchie pack, within just the few days that it was out, gained over 2 million downloads just for that specific pack. So anytime we create a new sticker pack, like we did one for World Cup, and we're creating other ones, we're having fun with it, but allowing him to also monetize off, the whole photo bombing just kind of phenomenon has been pretty interesting.
How much do the stickers cost?
It's a free app, and there's many stickers that are free, but as in any other app, if you'd like to download additional ones, there is a small fee. There was one sticker that was actually $99, and it was titled the Golden J. And you can look online to see what that actually is. But people bought that, and there was only a limited amount of those available.
So they paid $99 to get
For one sticker, yes.
so that they could put insert their picture in a picture with Snoop Dogg.
So so to insert their picture with Snoop Dogg with this Golden J.
Right.
Yes.
It's a digital status.
Okay,
Yes.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so Candice, Wattpad, it's pretty new. Can you tell us how many people are on Wattpad? What is Wattpad?
For sure. So interestingly, it's actually not that new.
Oh.
It's been around for 7 years, but it was an idea well ahead of its time. And it took a while to sort of find its moment, and now its moment. And the reason for that is Wattpad is today the largest community of readers and writers. And some people start thinking we're in the publishing industry, and it's actually not at all about that. It's what you guys are talking about, which is young people. Our audience is 13 to 30-year-olds who are really, really excited in expressing themselves and in feeling connected to the content that they are reading. And so we're a platform that allows anybody to write a story. And you don't have to write the full story. You don't have to sit and write this long piece of work. All you have to do is write your first chapter, and I know Anna will talk more to that, and you just publish. And from a reader perspective, you get the chance to not only read a piece of content, but to actually engage and feel connected and comment to the writer who just wrote that first chapter and tell them, hey, this is awesome, what happens next? And to play with the story and to it's a very multimedia experience, so it's not your traditional book. You get to actually cast celebrities like Snoop Dogg or any of these people into your stories. You get to put multimedia, you get to put soundtracks in these stories. And so we're this really interesting platform that lets people read about things that they care about. There's lots of fan fiction, which is pop culture influences in stories. There's we have 80 million stories, so we pretty much have stories that are about anything. And you get to feel really connected to the people writing those stories. It's a real community. And so when you think about what this panel is about, this is about engagement and connection and not being spoken to, but actually interacting and participating and playing with stories. That's what Wattpad is really about. Today we have 45 million users around the world. We're in 200 countries, 50 languages, and the most interesting stat about Wattpad for me is that we have 30 minutes of engagement per user. So, you know, in an age where people can't keep up with the feed, or like you're in there and you're out, right? And everybody's trying to get attention. These people who are reading and writing on Wattpad are spending like a lot of time immersed in stories.
Awesome.
Yeah,
we're lucky to have Wattpad's biggest star, Anna Todd, with us. Welcome, Anna. I had dinner with Anna last night, and despite her age, she's one of the wisest people I've ever met. Why don't you start from the beginning and talk about what your life was like before you discovered Wattpad and why you went on to Wattpad and what happened?
Okay, so I'll keep it short-ish. Okay, so I was just a reader. I'd always been a reader. I liked to write as a child and teenager, but nothing, you know, a million words is what my Wattpad story is, over 1 million words now. So I was writing these little things on Instagram. They're called Imagines. They're basically short stories in the caption of a picture. And so I started reading these all the time. And then one of the people that I was reading put her story onto Wattpad. And I thought, I don't want to read on Wattpad. Reading is easy on Instagram, which is totally not true. But at the time, I felt like it was. So then I found Wattpad, and it was this entire world of stories and people like me who are just writing for fun. And a lot of times now, my own opinion, a lot of writing and things that are put in our face are very forced. It's not an organic story. It's not someone writing something because they love to do it. They're writing it to make money, which is great, but not for readers, really. So I was in between stories on Wattpad, just silently reading and commenting and things, but I hadn't posted anything. And then this day, there was no one updating for about a week, which in Wattpad world is a long time to wait for another part. So I thought, you know, maybe I can write something just to entertain myself for fun. I didn't have any followers or anything, so I posted it then, just right at that exact moment. And then I was like, wow, that felt really good. So then I wrote another part, and another part, and another part. And then as it was slow, but it wasn't slow in the grand scheme of things. But I started gaining followers, and then I made a Twitter account, and then it just exploded because on Wattpad, you break down that fourth wall of the author and the reader. They can tell me things like, you know, I don't like that you did this, or I love that you did this, and you can literally see on every line on your story what they do like, what they don't like. And so you can play almost a puppet master, I guess, and just engaging with them, and they spread it on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, and I would use those platforms to spread it. So if I would post a chapter on Wattpad, I would go on Twitter and then Instagram and say the chapter is up, and then they would spread it, and it just became this massive thing that now has over 1 billion chapter reads. So yeah.
That's crazy. So how many followers do you have on Wattpad?
600,000.
600,000. And what about on Twitter?
Twitter is, I think, 217,000, and then Instagram is 260-something thousand.
Amazing. So then what happened? So you're the biggest star, you have 1 billion reads. What happens after that?
Well, people started trying to print the story off of the website, which is clearly designed to prevent that. And so I kept getting these pictures of people with this massive pile of pages that made no sense. And so I thought, well, maybe I will, you know, just print it, get it printed somewhere, because I'm not a professional author. I don't know how to edit. Well, now I learn. But at the time, I had no idea, and I didn't think of this as a career or something that I could monetize. So I thought I will print it myself. But then I worked with Wattpad to see, neither of us knew that it would be this, but I wanted to work with them because I love the platform, and they wanted to try to help me just see where we could go. We had no idea what we were doing. They were learning, I was learning, and now it's publishing deal and movie deal.
Right.
I'll just say, Anna maybe being a bit shy about it. She is a New York Times best-selling author as of last week. She has a 4-book deal. Woo! She has a 4-book deal with Simon & Schuster. She sold her rights in 27 countries to the work, and Paramount just optioned the film. So Yeah.
Congratulations.
Very excited fan.
Really exciting. And I guess three of those books were already written and up on Wattpad.
Yeah, well, basically 4 of them, but they're very, very long. I had no idea how long it was, and then we started editing it, and Simon & Schuster was like, either we cut, 300,000 words, or we add another book. And even my books now, the third one is almost 1,000 pages. So it's a very long story, but writing Serialized and writing, I updated every day, and I would spend hours and hours writing and then posting and then engaging with my readers. So I didn't realize how long it was.
Right. And you have a new book coming out February 21st?
Yeah, the 4th one.
The 4th one.
Yeah.
It's called the After series, is generally what people refer to it as. Excellent. Okay, so I want to move into how to use digital platforms and apps and the digital space to market, in your case, yourself or your clients. And we'll start with you, Anna, because when we were talking on the phone, you had some tips on social media. How do you promote each chapter, each thing that you write out there in the world?
I think especially for authors who aren't really familiar with social media, as I didn't even have a Twitter account until my 2nd book, and people kept saying, make a Twitter, and I didn't even know how to make a Twitter. And so I think you just have to engage with people, because now we live in a time where people are on their phones and they want immediate feedback and they want the relationship. They don't care so much about impersonal things. They want to feel connected. If I had never tweeted or never talked to a reader, answered their questions, or listened to their suggestions, I would never have any of this. And people want to feel something. They want to feel connected. They want to be able to tell me, I'm cutting my hair today. It has nothing to do with the book, but that's not the point. The point is that these people that I have in my, now the circle is much bigger, but in this big circle of readers, they will follow me. It's not just about a story. It's about, I'm not just this random person that wrote a story that they like, because I connect with them all day, every day, basically. So you can market yourself without even knowing. So if you post a chapter on Wattpad, for example, and then you go to Twitter and say the chapter is up, and my readers make pictures of the characters, and they make videos and all kinds of things. So I would post one of those with it, and then that spreads immediately. And posting on Instagram at the same time, you just do all of it in a row and then go back and talk to them on Wattpad, and it just markets itself.
Amazing. I want to move actually back to you, Candice, to talk a little bit about marketing on Wattpad or in the social space to millennials. I know it's a little bit out of order what we talked about, but it just seems to to flow from a business standpoint as opposed to the artistic standpoint that we've heard.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different sides to it. I think for Wattpad, it's about people like Anna using these tools and being really authentic, right? Like that you cannot pretend in this day and age where people can connect to real people, they really understand if it's real or not. So I think that's really important. When I think about it from a business perspective, we've launched something called Wattpad Brand Stories, which is helping brands connect with this very attractive and hard to reach audience, millennials who are on their phones all the time and very, very social, and they don't want to just be spoken to. They want to actually have dialogue and connect. And so for us, I'll talk a bit more about the kinds of campaigns that we're doing, but we're inviting brands who have stories to tell and who want to engage with our audience to do just that on our platform. And instead of creating a whole new way of doing it, we're actually using the very nature of our platform, which is telling stories. So for example, we've worked with entertainment brands like Fox or Paramount or Relativity to tell stories by working with our writers like Anna to write stories in the theme of their properties and to connect the dots between The Fault in Our Stars. Is people familiar with that? Did an amazing campaign on Wattpad to tell the story of extraordinary love by working with our writers, telling that story of extraordinary love and telling people that their movie is about just that. And Anna can talk to more of those. But I think if you're working on reaching these people, you've got to do it in a way that lets them participate and that is truly engaging and entertaining content and not disruptive, but rather about entertainment and connection and fan involvement. Like, don't be afraid of letting fans participate and create for you. It's your best amplification, would be my kind of advice.
Right, that level
way.
of integration, we haven't seen that before.
Right, and I think it's really different when it's in a entertaining context versus a news context, branded entertainment, because people actually want to feel entertained by brands, and that's very much what we're doing when we work with brands to tell brand stories.
That idea of branded entertainment, maybe, Kavi, you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I mean, everything from YouTube to Vine to Snapchat to other platforms are now emerging as a place where brands want to engage. The other day, I think I opened up my Snapchat account and there was a McDonald's ad, which I believe they paid $750,000 to Snapchat for. So there's a brand new market right now, especially as it relates to micro video content platforms, where brands are partnering with content creators to create content that's still relevant or organic to those content creators, but sends a brand message in a smart way that appeals to that audience, as opposed to coming off as something just cold and lifeless, as a 15-second pre-roll ad on YouTube sort of does.
Right.
And furthermore, when it comes to the music industry, brands are an emerging space where artists can now actually make money. Because, I mean, as a record label person, like the way music has been consumed has changed so much in the last 10 years, right? To the point where music is almost now, it's more of a tool to engage fan bases in other mediums of monetization when it comes to touring, merchandise, loyalty programs like fan clubs and things like that. But I've been part of a lot of brand relationships between artists and brands that are actually relevant to not only the artists on a creative side, but to their audience. And that seems to be sort of the primary where artists of a certain caliber and higher, or a certain audience number and higher, are making a lot of their money now, which goes to show you that continuing to find your audience on a lot of these new and emerging platforms, like we mentioned the messaging app space, something that's very, very key right now, I think, and Rona mentioned it earlier a little bit with the stickers pack stuff, is social media with nonverbal communication. So it's communicating with no words, and you can have, millennials can have an entire conversation with each other without actually saying anything. And that's something which is insane to me. Like,
next level emoticons.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that trend is going to continue, and it's hard to predict exactly, who the winners and losers are, because there's a lot of players in the space. Right. Like there's I'm sure most of you heard of the dating app Tinder, right? They made an acquisition of a company called Tappy, which is a messaging app. So like there's so many acquisitions and moves being made in the messaging app space right now, especially as it relates to how to monetize the content with brands, that it's just a very, very interesting space to watch, and something that that's what I've been paying attention to the most these days.
I find it almost impossible to keep up. I just mastered Instagram, and
right.
So it's already overtaken Twitter as the...
for users.
Right. Yeah. So what are some of the next apps that I need to pay attention to as a marketer?
That's a loaded question. I think certainly the messaging app space, there's other players in that space, like apps like Tango, Viber, Line, of course. Snapchat, I think, is now actually the most used social network among millennials or younger, especially
For those that don't
demographics.
know, tell us what Snapchat is.
Snapchat is the short way to describe it is it's a self-destructing messaging app. So, Is
it truly self-destructing?
No, but that was its initial intention. That was its initial intention, and the fact that brands are willing to cough up nearly 7 figures for an advertisement that disappears just to connect to a certain type of consumer, explains a lot as to where the movement is headed towards in the digital space, in the digital app space. A lot of my focus is looking into apps and services that can service a need as it relates to the live music space, especially because I work with a lot of music artists. One app that I think is doing a lot of innovative things in that space is an app called Turnstile Live. And essentially they act as a sort of like a chameleon app for live events. They can if you open the app at a certain event, it can geo-detect that you're actually at that app, offer you, on-site engagement activities, contesting, meet and greet opportunities, that kind of thing. And then they share the data back with the artists, right? So for the first time ever, I was able to do a tour with an act, and after the tour, 25, 30 dates, I was able to actually see, like, this is the demographic of the people that opted into this, that were actually at the show, right? Because I can know that 12,000 people bought tickets to a show, but I don't know that they're between the ages of, that the average age of the attendee was 25.4 years old, what the breakup was between male and female, what social networks that they're on, because, has the ability to connect social networks, and the ability to communicate to that person through their email address moving forward. So those are the kinds of opportunities that I think are very, very interesting from a music marketing standpoint. Also, there's apps or platforms like Crowd Album, which is a way to crowdsource photo content as it relates to live music. And artist promotional apps for contesting. There's an app called TuneSpeak, where
Can't keep up.
What?
I can't keep up. How can I find, how can I read something that sort of gives me the 101 of all the, is there anything like that out there? Is there
not really. I mean, there's certain news organizations and things like that, but honestly, I do a monthly check-in of the App Store. Pretty much every month.
Right, so you just go and check out every
Pretty much
app
every month I go in, I'll look at, there's certain categories, there's certain categories where if you see a new app in the top 100, you probably should check that out, that takes a lot of time, but that's also what I do.
That's what you do.
For my
That's why
career.
you make the big bucks.
I hope so, yeah.
So I want to get a little bit into data in a minute, but first I want to talk, I'd like to bring you into the conversation, Rona, and maybe if you could tell us, can you tell us the Black Jesus story?
Sure. So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with the show Black Jesus. It's on the Adult Swim Network. The network came to us and said, we've got this show, it's doing pretty good, but we could use a little boost. So we said, well, the show's been on air for a couple of weeks now, let's think about it. So, we brainstormed and we said, the most effective thing, just taking a look at all the data from their YouTube comments and what was going on Instagram and the hashtags being used, we said, let's just do something really simple. Based on these insights, there's a lot of conversation going on. Let's continue and further the conversation, but with influencers. So what we did was we created an influencer mailing, which consisted of a picture of Black Jesus, a religious candle, and also this thing that kind of mimicked a prayer card of words from Black Jesus. So we sent this mailing out to a few key influencers, very few. People that we didn't have to pay to do anything. At Cashmere, we've got some really great relationships with different tastemakers and influencers just because we've been in this space for a while. So we looked at our list and said, who do we think would appreciate this specific mailer? So you sent the mailer out to these few key people. And from there, to Kavi's point about, it's not even about all the words when people are messaging, it's about the image, and how do you communicate with just an image? Well, we found these influencers posting pictures of Black Jesus, the religious candle, and the prayer card on their social networks. So it was really, really interesting to see a picture of Black Jesus, which is literally a Black Jesus, in this ornate frame, placed on people's actual altars at home. in their studio, on their fire mantles, as if he was a family member. So from there, we had millions of impressions. You know, the hashtag was pretty interesting to see, you know, where this thing got posted.
What was the hashtag?
Just Black
Jesus.
Jesus.
Hashtag
And
Black
it was
Jesus.
very interesting to see that these, you know, from these few key influencers, we were able to garner millions of impressions because it was organic, because we did, you know, really take a look at the research and the insights from these platforms on what was working. So we just helped to amplify the conversation, utilizing the tools they were already using and, you know, really utilizing and, you know, maximizing on the relationships that we had. And it was a fun campaign for everyone, including the recipients of the package.
I want to talk a little bit about the concept, the rise of social influencers, which is actually now a job that you can have or a business that you could start. We were talking about that a little bit before. You talked about how, like, that you can do a media buy on somebody's, a social influencer, somebody who has a lot of followers on whatever platform they are. Like, how do you, tell me about how you would go about doing that.
So
For a client.
Yeah. So it really just depends on the client, and we take a look at, you know, what are their goals, what are the objectives? Are you trying to? Some of them are like, we need to reach 5 million people, or we need to reach 50 million people. So it really depends on their objectives, also what their budget is, because how we apply things now for the actual influencer outreach, like if I know you have that many followers, I might say, I'm gonna manage you and let me broker these deals. And there's a lot of those types of you know, agents out there and managers out there and agencies out there that are now managing social influencers. But really just taking a look at what the brand's objectives are and what type of budgets they have, and really saying, okay, well, we could cast a wide net on all of these influencers who we know on Vine, this person has 10 million, this person on YouTube has 5 million, and, you know, really take a look at the numbers that way, and that would be a media buy, because you do have to pay for those, you know, for that space and for that time. That's an actual media buy, which in my world now, that is a traditional media buy. Traditional media for us is no longer just print and out of home and all of that. But it really just depends on the client. And we, on the Cashmere side of things, we've just got relationships since we've worked with all of these artists and tastemakers and, you know, actors and actresses, that we have our own list that, you know, we don't pay for people to post things. It's just, we know if it's a good organic fit and if it's something that they would be into and interested in, they're included in the mailing. So it really depends. Sometimes, like for Black Jesus, it was like, let's make this really fun, cool kit. We know this team of people would like it. Let's send it out and see what happens. On the other side of things, you have bigger brands with bigger budgets that allows you to do both. So it really just depends.
And, you know, when you're speaking of marketing budgets, you're going to do a media buy with social influencers. How does that compare cost-wise to doing a media buy on a traditional, or even with Google ads, or, you know, how does it, can you give some kind of context to that?
Yes, you definitely get more for your money, I believe. And, well, you know, we are a digital agency, so of course I'm going to be a little biased. But there is definitely more for me in terms of the digital spend. Like, you could spend, you know, $5,000 for this one particular ad, whether it be on someone's social or a banner ad or a Twitter spend, and that's $5,000 going to maybe over 5 million people, where I can't even get a billboard for $5,000, or maybe I can get something on a magazine, but like our demo, they don't even read magazines, right? So it's just,
Do you want to make a comment about that, Candice?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to think about it is also, it's a much more connected and like impactful experience when it's coming from an influencer, because they have influence, versus just media, which is more about, you know, traditional media at least, which is more about like awareness or just having reach, like being around, versus when Anna, for example, who has worked as one of our influencers, wrote a story for Paramount's Project Almanac, her fans feel so connected to that piece of content that it holds more influence. So, you know, in terms of cost, I think it's like you have to think about it more cost per engagement versus just like total cost when you're thinking about these influencer pieces. But they're definitely becoming more common, that we're seeing at least shifts in budget into working with platforms that have unique opportunities for influence to happen. I don't know if you agree or.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
Anna, do you feel burdened by the weight of your social influence? Like the
No, because
amount of time that you have to spend engaging with your followers? Is that
No, the biggest reason why I don't feel burden is because I don't just influence things that I don't want to. So it's my social media. So if I don't want to tweet about something or write something, I'm not going to. So in that way, I have total freedom. So I'm never going to promote something that I don't like or something that I don't find interesting or cool or I wouldn't buy. So in that way, no. And also, my whole success came from influencing. And so to have, even when I mention, a book that I like, I'm never going to say, oh, read this book because my friend wrote it or something. It's always like that. And then having hundreds of people tweeting me, like younger girls tweeting me pictures of Pride and Prejudice. They would have never read that in their life. They would run away from it. And having hundreds of them tweet me a picture of it because I talk about it. It's that kind of organic relationship, so I don't feel a burden because if I don't want to do something, I'm not going to do it. So.
I'm also really interested in how it goes the other way with you. Like when you talk about breaking down that barrier, how do you benefit from this level of engagement? How does that impact your creative direction?
Well, specifically when writing on Wattpad, there were a lot of times where the entire story was never pre-written. I would just write and post without editing, which, sometimes authors cover their ears at that part, but I didn't edit. I had no intention. It was fun, and I didn't even know how to edit. So when things would happen in the book, and I could see what they were relating to and what they liked, and specifically with a certain comment. Like there was one line in the book talking about the main character having stretch marks, which is not normal in the romance book. And so to see all of these girls, there were thousands, like 10,000 comments on this one line. And so I knew that that was connecting with them. So I made it further. The next chapter or 2 chapters, I would find a way to, boost self-esteem by writing in a chapter. And so it's like things like that. If I saw things that they were relating to, and even shaping characters, like the main character's mother is basically shaped by comments and stories that I hear all the time and things that I have this insight into this millennial world and seeing how their parents are and what their parents are saying to them and how they're making them feel. I was able to create a hybrid mother who most of the people can connect with because I took specific personal relationships.
Everybody sees their own mother in that character.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant, brilliant. I guess, now do we have 5 minutes left and then a Q&A or? Okay, great. So I want to talk also a little bit about data and the importance of data and how to get the data and how to manipulate the data in order to do your jobs. Who wants to grab that one?
I'll kick it off
Okay.
since Anna just spoke about how she takes a look at the comments and the data, and that really, that can help her kind of shape certain things or let her know what direction she needs to go in. Someone like Snoop, who has 50 million followers across all networks, you have access to all of these insights, and the insights are so important when we're looking at new tools and platforms we're using. When we take a look at all the new apps and platforms like Kavi mentioned, what's important to us is how much data will we be able to access, what type of data is it. That then will drive a lot of our marketing strategies on how we're going to further things. We grew Snoop's social networks to 50 million and counting, and that's just across Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And a lot of that was due to all the insights that we were provided across the board. So if you know that you have people right now he's in Sweden, he's touring. If we know there's a specific group of people there that are very, very, very active in engaging with him, we're going to want to make sure we target that demographic, just geo-target that area with our marketing communication if he has a show there. So data is really key and really important and what really just drives all of our marketing campaigns and our strategies for all of our clients.
Go ahead.
I mean, I would just reaffirm what Rona just said. Like when it comes to Lincoln Park, the audience size is, probably 100 million or more as an aggregate, and probably more than half of that is outside of the United States. So it's, the way we understand the audience informs what kind of content we make, and also when we post that content, in what languages we decide to get the content translated in, if applicable. Like, those are decisions that we're constantly making. One thing I would add is, there's data that you can get from analytical tools like Next Big Sound. Pandora recently launched an artist marketing data platform. Various partners and streaming services and app companies offer different backends for analytics. So the hard part becomes taking it all in and actually being able to correlate, because that's like, you need a statistics degree, I think, sometimes to truly grasp all of it. It's hard to do if you're just doing it alone.
I would just add, I think in in today's times, since social media has been, or communication is democratized, so there's just so much information out there, and it all lies in the fact that anybody can communicate. So, on a platform like Wattpad, data is everything for us. We have 80 million story uploads, so we have to figure out what story to put in front of what person so that they find the stories that they want. That's one view. And then just in terms of how we're working with different industries, one of the biggest appeals to each kind of industry, to the entertainment industry, it's like, tell me which celebrities are being cast in your stories and trending, or is it, mermaids or vampires or, zombies that are sort of like the next big theme that young people care about. And for brands, it's like, what are those moments right now that are really being associated with Coca-Cola as an example? Can you kind of share that data? Or for publishing, it's like, what are the up-and-coming stories on your platform that are not just seeing like the most amount of reads, but velocity? So like, there's so much, I'm just giving you examples, like there's so much data accessible that in order to compete now, I think you really have to start thinking about what data matters to your audience, and there are really interesting ways to find it, not just on Wattpad, but just in general.
So do you have somebody that just manages your
We
data?
have a massive data science team.
Really?
And they are all
Well, I guess you have 100 people that work at Wattpad now, which is great.
There's just over 100
That's
people,
awesome.
and our data team is at least 10%, and they're the smartest people, and I know.
10%.
Pretty amazing.
Jealous.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
With that, I want to turn it over to the audience if anybody has any questions. We're going to go with the green. When I see, what is that what happens? I can see the green, and I go, yep, okay.
Hi, Jerry Brown again, kind of stealing here, but I have a question, well, mostly for Candice, but maybe, other people can comment. Having grown from this very small thing where, anybody can write, anybody can be discovered, you're now a pretty big deal. How do you balance the sort of featuring the stars versus letting people be discovered, right? Like how do you keep to your your roots, your original roots about anybody, because it's hard to it gets harder and harder to find things as you grow bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I would say the ethos of Wattpad is that it's all community powered, right? So it's not about us finding talent, it's actually the community's finding talent. And so we have lots of ways for people to be discovered. In the early days, we just had, let's say, 10 categories, right? Like romance, sci-fi, a few things. Now we have this idea of tags, right? Or topics where on any topic, and they get very, very specialized, like anything you're interested in, you have surface area for people to trend and rise. And so there's actually a tremendous amount of opportunity for people to still be discovered. And what we do is we tweak our algorithm so that you don't just stay at the top. So if you're an aspiring writer, we make sure that there's a lot of change and opportunity that lots of people can rise. And that's kind of how these bigger platforms start to work is, you want to make sure that there's not permanency, right? It's like Anna's like super popular right now, but there are, you know, new Annas and there are, you know, new people who are rising on our platform. And what's interesting is the amount of time it takes to rise on these platforms gets shorter and shorter. You can make a success much quicker once your platform has more scale, if that kind of answers the question.
Awesome. Let's take it over there.
Hi, Eric Bernberg. Candice, this is for you in particular, but it's probably relevant for all of you. You had mentioned foreign translations, and specifically because your app would be so text-based. I'm wondering, what are the mechanisms that you would use for those translations in real time when you're dealing with so much information and you're communicating with a worldwide audience?
Yeah, it's a great question. So our app is available in 50 different languages, and what we've done is we've actually created different editions of the app, but the content is all community powered. So, you know, you could be in, you know, a Spanish instance of Wattpad, but not all of the content may be in Spanish. So we let the community actually, you know, choose the languages in their countries that, or in the settings that they want. Anna can also talk. Her story's been translated into a bunch of languages by
so
her
mine
fans.
in particular has been translated in every language, basically.
Yeah.
So it was all about people asking. So someone would say, can I translate it into Spanish? Can I change it to Justin Bieber? Can I do this? Can I, any language?
Justin Bieber has his own language.
Well, I mean, basically, yeah. I think it's a totally new category for that. But it's all about the community, and they can do things. So if an author wants to keep it only in English or only in Spanish, they have the right, they own their property, so they have the right to say, no, I only want it in this, or yeah, of course, translate it for me, but it doesn't.
So who does the translating?
The user. They put all
I
of their
see.
time into translating it
Just for
for fun. Yeah.
fun?
So the one thing I would say is just like create the ability for people to create, right? So like, and there's not just on Wattpad, but there's other, you know, platforms where you can find people to do, you know, micro work or different kinds of work. And I know that there's some apps that, or some platforms that connect people with people who know how to translate things. So, you know, we've done a lot of it internally, but you can access the crowd to translate for sure. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that I reach out to partners at, you know, record label partners in Japan to get content translated. Similar in Germany and other European countries where we have friends that can translate content that's relevant to, you know, the client in their market. One note that I would add is China, which is, it's very hard, and you know, there's companies that you can go to hire that will translate all of your social media content and then repopulate the Chinese-specific social media platforms, like, you know, the Tencent platforms, the Sina Weibo, those kind of China-specific platforms. And it's an interesting market wherein that, you know, the Facebooks and Twitters of the world are not actually used there, right? But there's 1/5 of the population of the world there. So it's a very, very developing space is to building a Western audience, celebrity client, you know, musician, entertainer, with an audience in China where they actually are familiar with these celebrities, entertainers. The dialogue just hasn't been there due to those kind of challenges. And I think it's a very interesting space to watch. And if you haven't built an audience in those, on those platforms that are specific to China, it's something that you should consider doing. Unfortunately, if you don't speak Chinese, you know, you're automatically at a place where you're going to need to bring in outside resources to help you with that.
All right, let's go there.
Hi, Jake Gold. It's a question for Rona. When you're doing these campaigns for Snoop or Black Jesus, any of those that you mentioned, Are you collecting the data and keeping the data, and do you have access to it for other clients, or is it just turnkey to the existing clients?
It's turnkey to the existing clients, unless we have permission from the actual client to share with someone else. But since we do have access to the data for ourselves, we now have our own insights that we can make our best recommendations on strategies for other clients.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks.
Right, I guess not only how do you access the data, how do you interpret the data, but who owns the data?
Right.
Is that really probably what Jake is asking?
Yeah, and the client will own the data, and we have access to it.
How important is it for the artists to be early adopters of the platforms you're looking at? So Kavi, you referred to Lincoln Park being a very early adopter on Facebook, and ergo they're now got 65 million followers. How critical is that to be a first adopter?
I think it's very important. It's tough to say whether it's requirement. There's no automatic solution to developing a massive fan base on any given platform. There's so many variables involved in that, but you can instantly put yourself ahead of everyone else by being early. That's as core as you can get when it comes to new digital platforms. It's if you were there first, you're building the audience first, right? And then as other celebrities and musicians and entertainers come on board, their promotion of said platforms just benefits you even more. In my experience, being there early has definitely paid off.
I can definitely comment, Wattpad really, even though it took a long time to take off, we've really benefited from being really early in the space for a bunch of reasons, because there's no competition, right, when you're really early. And then in terms of brands that have worked with us really early, like One Direction, Sony did a campaign for One Direction on Wattpad over 2 years ago, and it was the most incredible thing where they commissioned some of our writers to write official fan fictions for Valentine's Day, a date with each of the boys. And this did insanely well on our platform of teenage girls. Millions of stories were written about One Direction that were then read, and then more were written. And now today, it's much harder, to your point around, platforms get very crowded very quickly, so being an early mover, you just get so much advantage.
It's the blue ocean.
It's the blue ocean,
that we were referring to this morning.
Yeah, you get it.
All right, if there are no questions, I have one that are there questions? No? All right, how about you?
Thank you. You guys are talking a lot about analytics, and I know that Wattpad has their own analytics team, but I guess for Rona and Kavi, what analytics platforms are you using the most?
Go first.
I'm a fan of a few different ones. There's one called Music Metrics. There's Next Big Sound, which is used by a lot of people in the music industry, especially since they've specifically worked out a deal with Spotify for artist managers and representatives to be able to see that data, and that's the #1 streaming service in the United States outside of YouTube. As far as the actual interpretation of the data, depending upon where I was at in my career at any given time, the level of resources greatly vary. Like when you're working for a company like Universal Music Group, there's a lot more people in the pipeline to help you with that data, but then if you're working at a smaller shop, a lot of it ends up contingent on you. So it's kind of a lot of experimentation, I would say, when it comes to my analytical approach.
And for us, we have a couple different approaches, but one of the big tools that we use is Next Big Sound, because we are very music driven. That provides us with a great deal of insight. Also, the YouTube analytics are huge for us because a lot of the clients that we do work with do create content. And then just the insights that come along with Facebook even, that's extremely helpful as well. And then we have an analytics team that has a whole bunch of different tools that they actually do use, just sometimes to track certain hashtags or other things like that. But I would have to ask them what that info is.
Awesome.
Thank you. Hi, I heard you mention the importance of influencers, especially when you're on Twitter and sometimes your voice is so small and you have this one person who can reach like 10 million people in an instant. What tools do you use to reach these influencers?
For us at Cashmere, because we have the relationships with these artists and with these influencers or tastemakers, it's likely that they may be in our network of people, and if they're not in our network of people, it's not too difficult to reach out. So there isn't really a tool that we use, no database or anything like that. We really utilize the network of people that we have available to us, and then from there, they extend their reach on our behalf.
So one thing about social influencers, in a sense, it's sort of like, you know, when you send out a press release to journalists to get them to write about your story, but there's a certain level of rules of engagement in terms of journalists that don't apply to so-called social influencers. Is there a different approach that needs to be taken with?
It's just like, I think, any type of relationship. So if you're a publicist, you know, you do dinners, you keep in touch with, you know, the writers for different publications. It's about building relationships with people. That goes for media people, social influencers. That also goes for, you know, just people that you just engaging with your audience as well. So it's on the artist side, it's let me engage with the audience on my own and see what their feedback is like and building that relationship. But also for us in terms of reaching out to just, you know, we have a PR team and it's not just about writing something and then pushing it out. It's like, all right, this writer from this specific outlet actually doesn't like to be on this list, so I'm gonna reach out to him in this way that he likes to be reached out to. And then for different influencers, some of them, like you can't just reach out to someone you've never talked to and just say, hey, I want you to do this for me. This is really cool. I think you might like it. It's, you know, it's having someone within your circle that they trust to say, hey, talk to Rona at Cashmere. I do a lot of things with them, and you might, you know, they're interested in sending you something. Like, would you be interested? They think you might like it. Would you be interested?
I think it's interesting from just from a pure logistical standpoint. Like, if she asked that if this panel happened 3 years ago and she asked that question, the answer would be a lot different than it is today. Like, in my experience, the majority of the top influencers on various social networks and app platforms actually have some sort of representation these days. Anywhere from, you know, the William Morris's CAAs of the world to the, you know, to the YouTube video networks to traditional management companies. It's actually quite exciting to see that and to see that develop over the past few years. Because when I first started working in the entertainment industry, that didn't exist. That was off the table.
Yeah. And I think just to your rules thing, because it's not a one-way relationship, influencers have to be very careful about what they promote, because the backlash is so huge for them if they, you know, if they aren't transparent or if they're promoting something that doesn't make sense for their audience. They're losing their audience, and that's what is most important to them. So I think there is the, you know, it may not be rules in the same way, but there is consequence for abusing your social influence. And so that kind of, at least, you know, what I've seen keeps things in check. And I know Anna could probably talk more. But,
All right. I have maybe, we're out of time. I just want to go over by 1 minute and ask Anna the question, because I wanted to bring this up earlier. But tell us about your books are up for free, and now you have a book deal. Who buys your books?
My people online, my followers, they still buy it. They went into stores in Barnes & Noble a week before it was released to beg workers to get the book, and they tweet me pictures of them with the book. And regardless, you know, when I first started talking to publishers, it was like, you want to keep it for free? Like, why would you ever keep that for free? But it hasn't really affected sales, and especially when it comes to foreign sales, After is the #1 book in France. So, and it just came out a week ago. So they're still buying it. It's but it's about the relationship. It's about.
And how do the metrics, physical to digital, like physical books to ebooks?
Well, it's backwards from what is now normal. Most people are buying ebooks, but mine is 70-30 the other way. They're going into the store. Especially these millennials, they're going into stores and they're reading, you know, 2,000 pages of a story. So they're still buying it, even though they can read it for free on their phone.
And what is the difference between your free Wattpad version of the story and your ebook that is sold for price?
It's quite different, mostly because half of After was written on my phone. So there were a lot of, autocorrect mistakes and typos and plot holes and things that when you're writing serialized, it's not so much of a structure. And going through the editing process, I learned a lot about the actual craft of writing. So there are a lot of differences editing-wise, and I changed things that going back, I wasn't the same writer at the end as I was in the beginning. So there were a lot of things that I wanted to change.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It's been such an engaging, fascinating conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, panel. That's great. You can relax for a minute. We've got a few things to wrap up the day. Don't go away yet. I've got a couple of things to go over. Really fascinating discussion. I too had a question. You don't have to answer, but for Anna and some of the other YouTube influencers, is I wonder if you would have been a success as a writer if Wattpad hadn't been around.
No, I don't think I would have ever gotten the story out either, because it gave me a platform where I could be totally, writing something and putting it online is a very vulnerable thing, but I had complete, no one knew who I was. There was no expectation. So if I wouldn't have had Wattpad, I don't know if the story would have been out, and if it wasn't for social media, there's no way. If I would have went to Simon & Schuster with a book that I typed on an iPhone, there's no way they would have bought it.
Very interesting. Thanks again very much. Appreciate it.